Welcome everyone. So this is a different sort of video. This is going to be my race report of the Tunnel Hill 50 mile. So the Tunnel Hill 50 mile is run coincident with the Tunnel Hill 100 mile. It's put on by Durban Race Management. They do a fantastic job with this race, and then they've got a few other races. But Tunnel Hill takes place nearby the town of Vienna, Illinois, and this is the iconic tunnel that you go through. And here's like part of the hill that you notice because it is like appropriately called Tunnel Hill. There's a incline that you're running up to get to this part here. It's a super fast course, really really fast. Last year, Charlie Lawrence set the world record for 50 miles on this course, and I'd seen Charlie. I passed by. The race is an out and back and then out and back. I was trying to do the 100 last year. I did not make it 100 miles. I finished 50 in somewhere over 9 hours or something. But anyway, the kind of cool part was just before or after the last aid station, must have been just before the last aid station, I saw Charlie running in prior to setting the world record. Next year, in 2025, it's actually the USATF, USA Track and Field National Championship for 50 miles. It's a fast course, really fast for 100. Some of the fastest 100 miles in the world have been run on this course by Zach Bitter, by Camille Herron. And anyway, so it's a really fast place, really fast course, really kind of cool course to run on if you like running in a straight line for a long time. If you do that, if you do enjoy races like that, if you want to try an ultra marathon and run one where you're just running in a straight line for a really long time, there's the Tunnel Hill 100, Tunnel Hill 50. They've got the marathon also. There's also the Hennepin 100 and Hennepin 50 and 50K that takes place in the first week in October. So Tunnel Hill is always, I think, like the second Saturday in November. The weather that we had was pretty good, 61 degrees. I'm not sure when this was measured. It was closer to 40 or 50, probably low 50s when we started. The race starts just after sunrise, and so I had a headlamp in the early morning this is the finished picture. This is way out of order. Sorry about that. I had my headlamp, and this is about the sun that you'd see after parking. This is at the Tunnel Hill, or this is the park entry. I'm not sure if it's actually Tunnel Hill, like State Park, might be the 20 miles away or 13 miles away. Tunnel Hill is actually somewhere like 10 miles from this park. This is in the town of Vienna. I took a picture of this bike, illuminated bike that's at the entrance for the park, and so here's you can do packet pickup the day of the race. I do not recommend doing that. I recommend doing packet pickup the day before because they've got a spaghetti dinner, and they feed all the runners, and they've got a speaker, and that's real cool. This is the morning. The town of Vienna has I'm not sure exactly if this is like an old like a train station or whatever. That seems to be like a rails to trails thing, but this is kind of a cool place right next to the finish line where I ultimately took my finish line picture or whatever. This is not actually, I mentioned this is the finish line. This is not actually the finish line. The finish line for the 50 mile and for the 100 mile is officially marked something like a quarter mile. It mentions this in the race information from the park right here. And so that's what I did is I just stopped, and then I walked in. I don't know, I can't zoom in any further, but basically what you do on this route is you start at that park and you cross a major road. They stop traffic and everything, and then you run down this trail. It's basically this somewhat, it's like kind of a mix between paved, but then there's like some sandy gravel stuff on it. So it's harder than an actual trail. I ran in my Vaporflies, which felt great for the southerly route, and then as I ran on the northerly route, I wish I had run in my Alpha Flies, but I did not. Anyway, you run all the way down here, and there's a little park thing, and there's a turnaround with a timing mat and everything. They've got a lot of timing mats at different places on the course. So firstly, that eliminates dishonesty and cheating, but then also it gives you nice race updates. And you can see your splits and stuff. Okay, so you run all the way down here, then you turn around. This is something. Uh, so uh, you turn around not quite to half marathon. It's something like 13.5 miles down here, and then you come back. You run past where they have an aid station set up at the park that you initially set out from, and then you run north. And it's when you're running north that you pick up all the elevation on the course. So you see a sign that says Tunnel Hill is something like 9.5 miles from basically that building I showed a picture of all the way up. And the tunnel's somewhere around, let's see, the tunnel's somewhere around right here because the actual turnaround is close to like 38 and a half miles. And then when you come back through the tunnel the second time on the return trip, then you're at something like 41 miles or so, or yes, something like 41 miles. So the tunnel's maybe like right around here or something. And if you're doing the 50, then you stop, once you get back to that park. If you're doing the 100, you do the same thing again. So you go through that tunnel 4 times and you go to the turnaround twice, each turnaround twice. Anyway, so here was how my race went. Overall, it was pretty good. I had a fairly good race, I felt. Here you can see my effort. I had a little problem where when I got to the elevation part, well, I guess like once I got to about 28 miles, I could see this in my running data. You see my pace fell. So I started off, my goal was to run something close to about 7:30 mile pace, and I was more or less on track for that. I ran through the marathon at around like 3:16 or something. I ran through the halfway point a little bit before that. I was on pace for like a 6:30, or actually I was on pace for like a 6:25 50 mile. I would have fallen off a little bit, but I was on pace for a 6:30 50 mile, which would have been awesome. But then I started having difficulty, a little bit of like hip pain and everything when I got to about 30 miles, 28, 30 miles. And then I slowed down dramatically. This is pretty brutal. Where I eventually, this is about when I was going through the tunnel. There's some aid stations here, and they have a lot of like aid stations every however many miles, which is really helpful. That information is on like the sign up page and everything. I actually didn't pay too close of attention to the aid stations because what I did is for a 50 mile, I fuel it kind of like a 50K, kind of like a marathon. So like lots of gels, and then I bring a bottle where I fill up with Tailwind and then soda along the course. If you're running the 100 mile, the aid stations are way more important, as are the drop bags. But I wasn't really paying too much attention. I did not have a drop bag for this 50 miler. My slowest mile was back to 12:50, and then when I came through the tunnel, I just wanted to get going again. I felt just so bad. I was pretty tired and pretty discouraged because I had been putting up this pretty good pace to that point. But I set the goal of when I came out of the tunnel, the second, on the return trip, to just run every mile faster than the one before it. And so I did that. And so I ran 9:38, 9:09, 8:52, 8:11, 7:52 or 7:42. I was using the hill. 7:59. Okay, that wasn't faster than the one before, nor was this one, but I closed with a 6:59. And I was at 6:33 pace because as you're coming in, you see the timer and you see what time you're on. When I left the tunnel, I set the goal of I realized if I ran 9-minute miles, I was on pace for a 7:15, 7 hours and 15 minutes. And as I started accelerating down this hill, I realized, oh wow, I can run under 7:10. And sure enough, this doesn't show it here. I stopped my watch after I crossed the mark, but my official time was like 7:09:53, I think. So I just barely made it. But you can see basically the elevation on this course. This right here is about where this right here is about where you're leaving that park. And then you just gain a tremendous amount of elevation. Like all this gain, this 1,345 feet, it's basically 1,300 feet. You more or less gain that in 7 miles, right? And then you lose it in 7 miles, which is the nice part. The tunnel is maybe like right here or something. It's not quite at the top. I don't. No, it is. Maybe the tunnel is right at the top. That makes sense. What I said was silly. Tunnel Hill, the tunnel's I think at the peak. Then you go down. The turnaround is right here. And then on the return trip, you have to go back up to the tunnel, and then you go down away from the tunnel. This is just a GPS mix-up. These are at the same elevation, and so this maybe wasn't quite accurate for what the maximal peak was, because this one's showing us higher than this. It's the same elevation. This looks like there's two peaks. No, this should just be one. But anyway, that's something to pay attention to. Like for those who might try Tunnel Hill, um, that pretty substantial elevation comes as a shock, or elevation change comes as a shock, because you're running basically flat until that point, and now all of a sudden, you've got to run up this hill that doesn't actually feel like uphill. If you look at the picture here, you can clearly see that it's an uphill. But when you're running along, because you're gaining however many feet, maybe it's not exactly 1,300 feet. I should look at exactly what the map is, but you're gaining most of that. Most of the elevation gain on the course is over the span of about 7 miles, and then most of the elevation loss is over a span of about 7 miles, and you just feel like you're running on this flat trail, and so you're like, why am I slowing down? Why are things not going so well? Well, it's because you're running up this hill. For yeah, so for the results, here's the 100-mile. These are fast times. So you have to be quite elite to run 100 miles under 16 hours, even under 20 hours. And so a 100-mile under 13 hours, these 12:36 and 12:48, 13:32, like these are fantastic 100-mile times. So super elite. Let's see. So I want to go down to 50-mile. Oops, what do I need to do this? I need to go back. Go back to 50-mile. Here's 50-mile. The winner did not break the world record, but was still really fast. So 4:56:34, that's a really fast 50-miler, right? And so, it's not quite, but basically it's running like something like 2:36 or 2:40 marathons. A 2:30 marathon would be 5 hours if you're running 52 miles or 52.4 miles. So not quite doing the math exactly right there, but this is super fast. And actually any 50-mile under 3 hours is flying, or sorry, under 6 hours is flying. I was all the way back here in 27th place, which with a 7:09:53. Which got pretty lonely. Like you could see, this is kind of spread out. So I had people to run with. So like I ran with some of the people that were in front of me, and then I got passed by a bunch of the more people who were in front of me. I lost a bunch of places. Like obviously, I was on 6:30 pace, and then before I kind of slowed down, which is fine. You never. There's always something with an ultra marathon. But anyway, so I was really happy with how this turned out. This is a like personal best for me by like close to almost 50 minutes. So my previous PR was 7 hours and 53, or sorry, 7 hours and 58 minutes, and then some change. And that was at a trail, like a true trail ultra. And so I was really happy with this. It's, it's a huge improvement on my personal best. And that's why people run at Tunnel Hill, to run really fast. But I'd wanted to run faster, and I'm, still a little bit annoyed that my hip and IT band and everything kind of gave out on me. Although I was really happy that I was able to pick up my pace. If you look at kind of the rest of the times here, so going back, there's a large number of people here. There's like 9 pages of length of result. Oh, there's some DNFs. Yeah. So if you're not able to finish the race, it records it as a did not finish. And this is a race that's relatively friendly for DNFing, because you go back past, like you run out and you run back. So you hit the marathon right before the park, and then you go out and go back again. And so, but the 50 milers, these are like the ones that dropped out, like those are legitimate DNFs. For this Tunnel Hill 100, if you're running the Tunnel Hill 100, if you're signed up for the 100, and then decide that you only want to do 50 miles like I did last year, you get recorded a official 50-mile finish. You're not eligible for results, or probably not for world records or stuff like that, because you started as a 100-mile runner, but they'll give you the 50-mile finish and 50-mile buckle. And so I got a 50-mile finish last year, though I intended to run 100 miles. That's both good and bad, because if you're trying to run 100 miles, something that's a little bit easier, because it's not a technical trail, and you're just running in a straight line, and you can't get lost, and so that's all good. The problem is that elevation can kind of mess with people's races if they're not paying attention to it. Also, it can mess with your mind that you're going back. You visit the start line. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth time is your finish. So you go by there 3 times. You might have drop bags there, and they have a nice aid station, and it's a really well done race. But there's 3 times to drop out of the 100 that are really easy. You can drop out at any aid station. You have to tell the race organizers that you're not finishing so they don't send out search and rescue. Same with all ultra marathons. However, this one, it's really, if you're unsure about your ability to finish, it's helpful. But on the other hand, there's a little bit of this easy way out that might lead to more DNFs, did not finishes, for Tunnel Hill, and than relative to like other races. But overall, like I was really happy with how I did. I really enjoy the races put on by Steve Durbin and crew. This is the shirt. So Tunnel Hill for Vienna, Illinois. Tunnel Hill shirts come with a hood, which I don't know. It's kind of unique, kind of cool. And they've got a collection of other races that they put on, mostly around Kentucky and Tennessee. They've got Land Between the Lakes, which is in the spring, and then Strolling Jim, which is on Rhodes in May. But anyway, overall, like I had a wonderful experience running Tunnel Hill 50. Previously did the 100 and dropped out. I would say, like if you know that you have self-commitment problems with finishing a race, this one's not so good because it does give you it makes it easy to drop out. On the other hand, like if you're looking to run relatively fast or looking for a course it's not easy, I wouldn't say, but because especially because that elevation there. But if you're looking for, I don't know, like a really well done, organized and supported ultra marathon, Tunnel Hill is sort of a classic, especially around this part of the country. So Tunnel Hill is very well known, as is Hennepin. I've done the Hennepin 100, finished it successfully once, and that's put on by Ornery Mule Racing Team, who also, there's a lot of cross support in terms of running aid stations between Ornery Mule and then Durbin Race Management and so on and so forth. So you see a lot of the same people in the ultramarathon community. And so you'll see a lot of the same faces at Hennepin 100 as in Tunnel Hill 100. If you're interested in looking for a fast 50 mile, I'd say 100% Tunnel Hill is the place to go. And big thing to kind of pay attention to is what the logistics of the trail are, how this affects like your fueling strategy, aid stations, and also to be aware of that elevation gain and to kind of plan for that and to pay attention to that in your pacing. Also to realize that though you might slow down going up the hill, you can start up again going down the hill, especially if you're running the 50. That might not necessarily be the best strategy in the 100. Hard to know, because I've never successfully finished the 100 mile at Tunnel Hill. But in any case, that's something to kind of keep in mind. I ran in the Vaporflies. So these are the exact shoes I ran in. Here's the rock. I actually brought this rock to Tunnel Hill and I came home with it. And so I ran in the Nike Vaporflies. This might kind of become my go-to for non-technical trail races. I do not recommend running in the Vaporfly at Tunnel Hill. I would say if you're going to go with Nike Super Shoes, just go right for the Alphafly would be what I would do. Unless you're completely untested with Super Shoes, in which case you would do the Vaporfly. If I was to do the Tunnel Hill 50 again and not wear the Nike Alphafly, I would probably want to go with the current version of the Saucony Endorphin Pro. I think that's probably the better. So it's not Saucony's top end super shoe, not the Elites. I think that rocker is a little bit too aggressive. It probably wears on your quads, at least for me, it wears on my quads too much. But that's what I'd recommend for a shoe for a course like this. You do not need trail shoes. You can run with ordinary road shoes. Some people run with gaiters. I did not run with gaiters. I did get a small stone that jumped in, only one, and I completely ignored it. It jumped in at maybe 13 miles or maybe 20 miles, and I just I didn't pay much attention to it. I ran with relatively tight compression socks because I didn't want to get blisters like I did in the previous marathon, running with Nike Super Shoes. And so, anyway, that's basically what I'd recommend. The other thing is it did rain this year, and so the 100 milers had to face actually I think relatively substantial rains, which I know more than a few runners who ended up dropping down from the 100 to the 50 because it rained and that kind of screwed up their race. So you want to pay attention to the weather forecast here. What, like 2 years ago, I think it snowed, and there's snow on the ground. And I saw the weather forecast and I saw that it snowed, and I was like, I'm out. I'm not gonna run this race in the snow, which might have actually been a mistake. It might have been kind of fun, but the weather forecast is important to pay attention to, not just in Vienna itself, but because the way the course works, you run out 10, well, first you run out 13 and a half miles and then back, and then you run up 10 miles. You want to kind of pay attention to what's the weather going to be up here, and then what's the weather going to be down here at the times when you're going to be passing through, right? Because there could be substantial difference. That's also a major problem or major thing to pay attention to if you're going to run basically any other ultra, is pay attention to how the weather might be changing farther away from the start and finish line, and what the weather's forecasted in that area during the time when you're going to be there. And that's really important for prepping drop bags, the bags that you can stash along the course that might have food or change of clothes or stuff like that. But in any case, hope you found this interesting or useful. Hopefully not discouraging you from any ultramarathon endeavors. And if you had found this video because you're on the fence about signing up for the Tunnel Hill 50 or 100, I think it's a fun race. I think everyone who's interested in attempting a relatively fast 100 or 50 should probably do Tunnel Hill. It's a good way to set a benchmark for what you can accomplish. It's kind of like the fastest that you're ever going to run, you'll probably run at Tunnel Hill, would be my guess. Unless you do one of those silly track races, ultra track races. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and conclude here. I hope you enjoyed the video.